Good evening. Welcome to American University Museum and our virtual gallery talk for the exhibition Diane Berko, Seeing Climate Change. American University's Year of Climate Action has just begun. It builds on the university's commitment to engage faculty, staff, and the community at the intersection of scientific insight, artistic imagining, political struggle, and public searching. It is a call to action against the existential threat of climate change. It all began with an exhibition proposal from two pioneering feminist scholars, AU professors emerita Mary Garrett and Norma Braude. They proposed the museum present the exhibition Seeing Climate Change by the painter, photographer, and climate activist Diane Berko. The American University Museum has several times been the beneficiary of collaborations with Garrett and Braude. Their provocative teachings inspired generations of resistance to the more masculinist tendencies of modern and contemporary art. And unfortunately, their work is as relevant today as it was in the 1970s. The involvement of Garrett and Braude convinced me that this is the right time, that we must use this opportunity to educate, to understand the broader socio-political implications of environmental degradation, and to place Berko's work on climate change in its larger art historical context. Berko has long been a prominent and persuasive advocate for art's role in addressing climate change. Her experience led her to insist that a symposium was needed to augment her exhibition, to make sure we moved out of the realm of objects hung on walls and into the realm of action. As Klaus Oldenburg put it in his 1961 manifesto, I am for an art that does something other than sit on its ass in a museum. Our symposium, appropriately titled the Seeing Climate Action Symposium, takes place on campus and virtually on November 5th through 7th and features prominent artists, faculty, climate advocates, and scientists from across the country. You can learn more about this event at american.edu/climate action. We hope to see you there in person and virtually as the science allows. To moderate today's discussion between Mary Garrett, Norma Braude, Diane Berko, and you, we have enlisted the services of Alana Quinn from the Cultural Programs Office of the National Academy of Sciences here in Washington, D.C. In her role at the Academy, she organizes exhibitions and public programs exploring intersections of art, science, and culture. In 2018, she curated Diane Berko's exhibition at the National Academy of Sciences, Endangered from Glaciers to Reefs. At the Academy, she has just installed a 40-year retrospective of photographs by James Baylog, and the exhibition is largely focused on the devastating impact of climate change on the Earth and its inhabitants. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Alana Quinn. Thank you, Alana.
Thank you, Jack. It is my pleasure and honor to moderate today's discussion between Diane Berko and art historians and exhibition curators Mary Garrett and Norma Braude. Knowing that many of you, it looks like we have almost 100 people here already logged in, are joining us from across the United States and beyond, I'm delighted to share with you this 14-minute video to give you a sense of the exhibition in the gallery. While the video is playing, you can feel free to enter questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll be here and we'll try to start responding to some of the questions. And then we'll come back on with our videos and continue the discussion after the video.
Diane Berko is a Philadelphia-based artist, best known for her landscape paintings of monumental geological sites. She has also been a longtime feminist and political activist. For the past 15 years, she has brought her artistic identity to the cause of climate change.
Berko immerses herself in nature's rhythms in specific places while constantly moving around the globe.
Collaborating with scientists to publicize the global crisis, and mobilizing art's unique power to awaken our senses to the perils that we face.
Her small paintings of particular sites, produced over the past 2 decades, express her experience of the planet as an organic whole whose stability is now under threat from climate change. In the unusual spaces of the American University Museum, most of the walls are curvilinear, which presents a challenge for the installation of large flat paintings. But these dynamic spaces also present an opportunity. The ground floor galleries that house the Berko exhibition are, in plan, like a spiral or a nautilus that circles back on itself. This means you see the beginning and the end of the exhibition at the same time. You can also follow it chronologically along the spiral path, which is how we hung the show, and we now invite the viewer to follow. So here we are at the entrance to the exhibition, and we're standing in front of the 3 large paintings that announce the 3 themes represented in the exhibition: glacial melt, coral reef destruction, and COVID-19. Diane has always been interested in maps and geographies, and she uses them not so much to inform you of where things are, but to express states of mind about these things. Diane, when you started to devote your art to climate change, how did that affect your art itself? How did you change your studio practice and what the kind of art you began to make?
First of all, I had to learn a lot more, didn't I? I knew how to paint, but I needed to really educate myself in these issues, because being a landscape painter, I understood the landscape. I knew how to, define it. I knew how to travel to it. But the science of climate change was new to me. I mean, I knew about it in a public sense, so I did my homework, Mary. I started looking at a lot of different images, geological images, climatology images, and then my practice just kept expanding aesthetically, I guess. And that's why I really appreciated your putting that quote by Thomas Lovejoy right up there as we enter the exhibition. And I'm going to read it. The most effective alert to the threat of climate change is likely to come from the world of art rather than of science, because art has such an extraordinary way of cutting across human society.
Scientists inform, artists express. It's about the human response to what's happening, not the information that we are getting that makes us feel the things we feel.
True. It's about processing the data into my language. We're all contributing to this effort to try to alert the public to, the biggest crisis of our lifetime.
Could you tell us a bit about what being a photographer does for your creative process?
A camera, for me, is a way of recording. It's a way of drawing. It's a notebook. So when I first started using photography, quite frankly, Norma, it was that. It was a vehicle and a tool. What you have here is a whole row of investigations that had to do with glacial melt. They had to do with my trips to the Arctic and to the Antarctic. And then below here, you have examples of photography that I did from drones using a GoPro, and also just from my camera. Early on, I didn't even think about composing. But once I got into photography, believe me, there are a lot of other photographs I took. These are the ones that qualify as what you say is a photograph. A piece of art unto its own as a work of art. And photography is a work of art. Clearly, it's another one of the great arts, yeah. Now, the lenticulars, on the other hand, are a much newer medium for me, and I call this part of my time-based media that I've gotten into. And quite frankly, if I was born like 50 years later, I probably would be doing a lot more time media, because I love video and I love movement. But what the lenticulars allowed me to do is sort of capture movement still working on a two-dimensional plane. And I always thank Anna Tass, who was my collaborator, who knew everything about this medium, and I knew nothing, but I knew what I wanted. We just started experimenting together using baby oil, and then it was soap. And it's crazy. And we just kept shooting as an animation. And that began video for me. And then I did a reef video, and then working with Katie Suppley, who collaborated with me, and then Alana Ribic was my other collaborator. Alana did the sound, and really we sort of worked off of what I already had done with the reef to make this ice melt video. So.
And one thing led to another, as
Exactly.
it always does in the creative process.
Norma and Diane and I all agreed that we wanted the exhibition to include not only her paintings, but her time-based media. The juxtaposition does something, as I say, quite unexpected. It introduces, in a very aesthetically exciting way, the idea of time. The mountains stand for us as symbols of stability, yet we know that the field around the mountains is changing, that the earth is beginning to show through. When we bring the video into play with it, time comes in more urgently. Things are moving, things are changing fast, and we have to think about what is happening in this kind of newly emotionally triggered way. But the speed at which the glaciers break off and calve is more like the video now. It's time that's happening faster and faster, and that's what this juxtaposition invites us to think about. Similarly, the Glacier Map series is also about this idea of time. The Glacier Map series begins with brighter colors, aquamarines, dark blues, whites, and as we progress along the sequence, the blues and dark blues take over and the white disappears until gradually we reach the panel where the artist views the earth from both poles and the whole earth is dark. There are no more glaciers.
Well, the natural place for me to start was certainly with that glacier map, because glaciers is where I started when I got into climate change. And this whole series was sort of a culmination of that, starting with the glaciers. And it's fun to stand here with all these glaciers around me from different times. Norma, here we are. We just left the cold ice, and we're in the Pacific, and we're dealing with coral reefs.
And we are standing directly in front of one of my favorites, your painting of the Great Barrier Reef.
The Great Barrier Reef, yes.
In Australia. Now, the way in which you juxtapose these gorgeous swathes of flowing color with occasionally
Death.
the dying coral,
Yeah.
wood that appears as collaged elements in your work. So there is this element of juxtaposition and surprise. You go from the beauty of it to the destruction of it.
This was the first one, actually, the first painting where I did introduce something, from the natural world. I got remnants of fan coral, dead fan coral. I certainly didn't kill the coral. And over there, we see sponges that also come from the ocean. Those are shells that come from the Keys. So they were red like that. So that, of course, helped lend the whole idea of, adding that color to the painting. But of course, the other thing that added the color to the painting is NOAA Coral Reef Watch, which is showing the red as being the heat of the world that is heating up in 2014 to 2017, for instance. Yeah, I guess it's a bit of irony, actually, even though I sometimes don't say I believe in irony. But yeah, I am juxtaposing some realities, because that's the way the world is, isn't it? It's full of these positives and these negatives and these joys and then these sorrows. And so much of that, I think, in 2021 is like that, isn't it? In terms of the world we're experiencing.
You're really demonstrating to us what it is we're losing.
Well, we can still save some of it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, this was the first video. Remember I talked to you about the, and I wanted the circle because just like I wanted the circle and the lenticulars, I don't know, it's about the globe, isn't it? And it's also about the microscope, and you'll see later on, you actually see a confocal microscope images that I got when I was in Hawaii. And it's also about portholes.
Well, this whole experience of looking at the video replicates you as a diver looking down into the water.
So now we're moving from the coral reef section into a new realm, the third segment of the show, about what happens with global warming as the world heats up. Rising temperatures, accelerating change in all the systems of the Earth.
Yeah.
The Coral Triangle, in the painting you present this issue so clearly and vigorously, powerfully. And as we move along this wall, Suddenly, it's not about rising temperatures only, it's about the global pandemic. In summer heat,
Yeah.
everything is happening at once. The causes and effects of climate change are crashing into each other.
Yeah, they are. They are.
And this painting is really becoming quickly iconic. It's becoming the image of now.
Yeah, but you know, it's ironic. It's the image of now, but it's already yesterday. In March of 2020, we can all remember back to that, COVID was rampant. And I was aware of the map of the US on the news, and you know, there was New York, and there was California, and there was Washington, and you know, there was the map. But of course, it's also aesthetics. And yeah, at first I made the map, it was just that and that, but that was too graphic, you know, it was too obvious. So I kept adding panels to it, and you know, came up with this painting.
As the planet has relentlessly warmed, Berko's art has responded with increasingly abstract and increasingly dramatic visualizations of the effects of climate change. These very abstract landscapes remind me of the popular catastrophe landscapes of the Romantic era in the 18th century, the kind of experience that resonates with the fearful and the threatening. This was an aesthetic response to art and to nature that in the 18th century was known as the sublime. But these canvases by Berko differs, it seems to me, from that kind of earlier historical experience, because the sublime today is an aesthetic experience that can no longer be separated from the actual dangers that we face in our daily lives as a result of climate change. Nor can we see these kinds of catastrophic, destructive events as something that is distant and beyond our control. We can't think of them as being an act of God or a result of the malevolent forces of nature, all things that we, of course, cannot control. Today, we know, however, that what we are experiencing is entirely within our control. All of this is our fault.
So that was a beautiful video that really gives you a sense of the exhibition, and it's very expansive. I think there are more than 100 works in the exhibition, with the range of media and themes explored. I thought to kick things off, Mary, Norma, and Diane, I'm curious to hear a bit about how you first met and how this exhibition came to be.
Mary, I think you're still,
Got it. Yeah. Diane, do you want to start that one? Or
well, we have met in the last century, let's put it that way, way at the beginning of the feminist art movement. And really that was our connection. It was about feminism and about art. And we've known each other ever since the 70s, right, Mary and Norma?
yeah,
Right. We go back a very long way, and
Mhm.
we started out as activists together in the feminist art movement, especially as it had to do with college art professions. And our friendship has gone on for decades. We were always aware of Diane's art and admired it. But I would say that perhaps in the last 10 or 15 years, as her work has gravitated more toward the issues of climate change, it has assumed for us a really new magic and relevance, and we've become more and more excited about it. And we've been following it very closely. I would also have to say that we have been privileged in the last few years to really follow the unfolding of these wonderful monumental works in Diane's studio.
Yes.
I think
studio visit was wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it was important that we have known each other such a long time because we are very familiar with each other's work and actually each other's histories. And so we found when we started to collaborate on this that in fact it was extremely easy to do. I don't think collaborations between artists and art historians always come out perfectly or beautifully, but we felt that we were kind of in sync in our thinking so frequently, and we could almost finish each other's sentences by the time we stopped making Zoom, having Zoom discussions about the planning process. So it was very much built on strong roots.
Yeah, and it was a wonderful process, I might add. I've never worked so closely with curators, although Alana, you and I did work together, of course, but over a much shorter amount of time. Mary and Norma, they first approached me, I think in 2018, when I had the show at National Academy of Sciences, and they sent me an email suggesting it and asked me what I thought. Well, of course, I thought it was a great idea. I was honored and touched, and we just went on from there. And I think with COVID, it kind of allowed us to have almost more discussions through Zoom and looking at the work and just evolving in our thoughts and with the plan. We always looked at the plan. So installation and how things would flow based on what these curators and art historians were thinking about was really tantamount to how we sort of went forward.
Oh, that's great. And I do see this thread of activism, Diane, in your work from the early days until now. So you've been focusing on the landscape since the 1960s in your work. And I was curious to hear from Mary and Norma what they think happened with your practice and style as you began to address climate change over the past 15 years or so. And also just thinking more about how your work relates to art historical traditions.
Let me take the first part of that, and I think Noah has some things to say about the second part. It's important for those listening who don't know Diane Berco's long career that she has, as you say, been a long time landscape painter. It's important also to know that she was very experienced in the abstraction mode as well, because in graduate school, ABX was the dominant sort of style. And so she very much knew how to do that, but it didn't come into play in her art until much later. And so she started out painting mountains because she loved mountains. And then she started traveling and she painted waterfalls in Iceland, volcanoes in Hawaii. All this was rooted in naturalism, basically a holistic vision from a single point of view. But when she took up climate change, and I'm talking about how I see it a little bit, maybe not exactly as Diane sees it, but when she took up climate change, she began to adapt her style and techniques to follow a changing conceptual framework. Her subject has always been nature. Always. That's what links the past with the present now. But nature is changing now before our eyes. Specifically, the Earth's dynamic equilibrium, which has existed for 10,000 years since the last ice age, is breaking down. Now, once Diane Berco, she got it. She understood it almost viscerally. And once she internalized the disruption that climate change has brought to the natural order, that holistic vision no longer seemed possible. So to address climate change, she began to use shifting fragmentary perspectives, the modes of abstraction, and to experiment with new materials and techniques. So she moved from that to, first she was doing this sort of documentary paintings, the before and after images, the way photographers did in the 19th century or 20th century, to show serial images of a glacial field as ice melted over time. Then she began to impose lines of recession. Already she's abstracting the naturalist image. Then she begins to combine different frames of vision. Naturalism goes with charts and maps. And then she started on coral reefs. And from there, she crossed over definitively from descriptive naturalism to expressive abstraction with bits of optical and physical reality inserted, as you just saw in the video. So then she begins, and I'm just going to round this up quickly, she begins to pour paint on a flat horizontal surface, moving it around with an air compressor. At one point, she described to, I think in the catalog, Alana, that you edited in your show, she describes the relationship, that almost magical identity between the flow of air-blown paint and the air currents that move the ocean. It's, the small thing is like the large thing. The lenticulars similarly give us the illusion of flowing movements around a circular disk. That's like the planet itself. The small thing is metaphor for the large thing. To me, I'm a Renaissance scholar. That's like the Renaissance concept of the microcosm and the macrocosm. It's the affinity, the Renaissance, people like Leonardo believed there was a real affinity between micro and macro, but Diane has been always sensitive to that relationship, and it's always in her art. So she moves from descriptive naturalism to metaphoric abstraction. And to me, that's an exciting shift because it does correspond so much to the change of vision and the way we understand our changing world.
Thank you, Mary. I mean, I am just so honored to have you comment like that on my work. I totally agree with you, of course, but wow. Love your analysis. Thank you. Norma, what do you think?
Well, let me shift a little bit more toward the way in which art historians will tend to see your work. And to me, as an art historian, what distinguishes you from others who focus on climate change in their work are the powerful echoes of a whole range of art historical traditions in your painting, because they do resonate on a very effective subliminal and sometimes a conscious level to reach out and engage your audiences. As an example, of course, earlier in your career, you were fascinated by Monet's water lily gardens, those very limpid and beautiful large paintings. And to my eye, that fascination reemerges, much transformed in your more recent work, in your views of our dying coral reefs, which you see through the water from above. And then, of course, as I mentioned in the video, that whole phenomenon of the catastrophe landscape, that tradition from the late 18th and early 19th centuries, of which I think, Diane, you were not specifically aware before I shared that analogy with you. All those mountain avalanches and volcanic eruptions and the terrifying forces of nature that were painted by artists like John Martin and Turner and de Lautherbourg. Those spine-tingling spectacles of natural catastrophe that were enjoyed so much and admired by artists and viewers in that era. That manifestation of the sublime, then considered to be one of the highest forms of aesthetic experience. So for me as an art historian, able to bring these connections to the experience of Diane's work, her unique blend of the languages of science and abstraction very effectively bring those earlier traditions back to life. And they do so with a new passion and a new relevance for the conditions of our own era, this very, very unique era with its specific and heartrending conditions.
Can I just add one thing to extend Norma's analysis there? I think it's so important, as she says, to understand how your work continues and extends landscape traditions, but it renews the genre by extending scope. What you're doing, you're going from Monet's garden to large parts of the whole earth, viewed now through the lens of change, but now over a geological time, not just a course of a day or a season. You got a broader perspective. You now you photograph from airplanes and you paint what you see from planes and from the satellite. You imaginatively identify with the satellite circling the earth. One of the paintings in the show that's actually at the beginning of the show, we didn't have room for it in the show, so we put it in the entrance to the lobby of the museum, Ramona for a Landsat series. It's really, the viewpoint is that of the satellite, the space traveler. So landscape has been taken to above the earth, below the sea. I mean, Monet would have been astounded. I think he might have gone with you on it, though.
He totally would have. I mean, you know, I was fortunate enough to have that residency in Giverny for 6 months. And that's really when I began to totally appreciate Monet in the sense of he really knew where to paint. I mean, he went everywhere in France, and I followed that campaign, all of them, and he got it. So if he had a plane, and he would have done it. And I think what I'm just reflecting is an artist who lives in the 21st century. Okay, I have access to Landsat images. I have access to flying or to doing GoPro. And I'm taking advantage of that as an artist. It's another way for me to see, or I should say, gather information that I can then process into my art.
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious just to hear a little bit more about how you are interacting with all this information and images that you're gathering that you source from the scientific community in some of your more recent work.
Well, I don't think I could have done this body of work without the scientific community, for sure. I've really been fortunate to have an exchange with glaciologists, climatologists, ocean people and earth people for quite a number of years. And I think what's wonderful about the connection between art and science in general, as you know, Alana, based on the programs you do at the National Academy of Sciences, there's a lot of affinity between science and art. And scientists get it, and they actually love artists. I've never met a scientist who didn't like an artist, I have to say. And I love them because they give me information. And when I first got into this whole subject, when I changed my vision from just painting a landscape to making a landscape that also was about something else, had more purpose, I reached out to scientists, and they were there. Bruce Melnia, who came to see my show this past weekend, answered my emails and said, I'll teach you what repeat photography is. Again, I met Patrick McConaughey this weekend again at the museum, and he's the Smithsonian Director of Environmental Research. So we need each other. I need to learn, and they need us. And I say us because I represent hundreds, thousands of artists who are involved in this climate art kind of nexus. They need us to communicate. And I've been participating, I think, ever since 2012 on panels that are about how artists communicate science. I mean, I'm an InStar fellow in Boulder. I mean, we talk to each other and we learn from each other.
Let me just jump in and say something you're not going to say. I heard a video discussion between you and J.D. Talasek, Alana, your colleague, and he said something I wrote down because I thought it was wonderful. Art has the power to make science personally relevant.
Yeah.
And then he went on to say that you in particular are a communicator who puts scientific information into the public discourse. You're very good at it, I'm adding here too, because you bring your own emotional attachment to your activism. I mean, your art is about your emotional response to what's happening. And as an activist, the person who can communicate with scientists and bring the issues that they talk about into a kind of human realm of excitement, feeling, response.
Yeah, well, in terms of activism, as the three of us know, who've all been involved in the feminist movement, I've always been an activist, but it really isn't until this century, maybe it's what makes my art, I think, stronger, maybe, is not until this century in what I'm doing am I able to really blend my politics with my practice. And I think, Mary, that adds another level of dimension or emotion or commitment. I don't know what the right word is. But yeah, because I feel deeply, strongly that we all have to do our part to try to save this environment for the next generation, for our grandchildren and those after. So I have this purpose that I don't think I had when I was, painting Monet's landscape. It's different.
Yeah, I mean, what the crux of this conversation, I think, is what is the role of art in addressing the climate crisis, and what kind of impact do you think it can have?
Who's going to answer that?
I think
Could be
again,
for anyone.
it's not really my turn because it's something that Norma thought I should make sure to emphasize. I think that, you know, lots of different artists do different things, obviously, and there are a lot of echo artists who are doing a variety of kinds of things. You can't generalize about it, but unlike many echo artists, Diane Burko doesn't mimic the apparatus of science or the imagery of scientific experiments. She keeps you in the world of painting. Art in her situation is an equal partner with science. They both collaborate to cope with climate change. Scientists tell us what's happening, artists awaken our feelings about what's happening. And Burko alerts us to our loss. I mean, that's what it's about, with the loss of the beauty we are experiencing through her art and the beauty of nature's complex and subtle operating system. So art can do things science can't do. But science can do things art can't do, of course.
And let me add to that, that through all this, Diane never sacrifices seductive beauty, as she has referred to it. She wants to convey her message through beauty and not through dystopian narratives. I'm again quoting from Diane. Beauty in the abstract is something that has the power to awaken us morally and intellectually as well as aesthetically. And that I think has always been a cornerstone for Diane's practice. But I would also point out that beauty can be a double-edged sword if empathy is lacking. And the example of that I give in my catalog essay is a chilling remark that was reportedly made during World War II by one of Benito Mussolini's sons. He compared the vision of an exploding bomb seen from above as it destroys a city to, he said, the breathtaking beauty of a flowering rose. So it's that kind of precarious tightrope of aesthetic and moral response that I think Diane is able to navigate so very successfully in her art. She uses beauty empathetically. She uses it to awaken us and not to numb us.
Well, thank you, Norma. That's beautifully said. I think it's just being authentic. You know, when I used to teach painting, that I've always thought that was a key in the studio. Kids didn't know what to do. My students, I said, well, just go with what you're thinking. Go with what you're feeling. You can always tell when a piece of art is authentic, right? I mean, you guys can, I can, you can, Alana, and it has to do with that authenticity. So you just got to go with your feelings. And Norma, you're right. I am a painter. I am a painter before anything else, before I'm a politician or a lecturer. But I want to use my painting. I want to use the language as a painter to explore and, you know, bring attention to these issues. So I have to do it that way.
So I'm looking through, oh, go on.
I was just going to repeat that Diane's generation is the generation of modern painting, as is mine. And that's probably why her work for me as an art historian is so exciting.
Thank you.
I'm looking through some of the questions. We've received quite a few questions. Clara asked Diane, I'm curious if you can talk about how you started to lean more into abstraction to communicate about climate. Was that a slow shift? And what is that visual language rooted in?
Well, I think Mary touched upon it earlier. You know, it had to do with, again, in terms of painting, I think you always have a marriage between form and content. And so I started out depicting things as I knew how to do as an en plein air painter. And I just went with the flow of everything. I actually started out way back in undergraduate school as an abstractionist. I mean, de Kooning, Mata, or you know, Joan Mitchell, these were the people I looked at way back then. And then I slowly got into realism and, you know, pursued that. And certainly when I got into dealing with these maps and dealing with the abstractions of Landsat, that's so abstract, it's so cool, you know, and I'm a formalist. You know, even if I have a realistic painting, it's abstract as far as I'm concerned. But the water and coral reefs, of course, allowed me to really go further because I had to find a way to paint it. I mean, here I was doing glaciers, which I knew and I could figure out. And then I'm asked to be in a project where I'm going to American Samoa for 2 weeks and I'm going to be snorkeling. Well, I knew I wasn't going to draw coral reefs. That's not my style. I'm not a labor intensive artist. I have to figure out a way to do it through my language, and pouring paint just seemed like the logical thing. Slowly, believe me, I made a lot of mistakes, but that's what stuck, and I've been playing with that ever since.
Yeah, I love how you went from oils to acrylics, which I think you'd used earlier in your career because it related more to the subject.
Yeah, it was a water-based material, and I pour it. Yeah, but then actually in a lot of the paintings, actually the one behind Norma to her right, the red one, which is about COVID, there's a combination of oil and acrylic. So, you know, I went from oil to acrylic and then from acrylic and oil and everything in between, plus collaging and putting stuff actually in the painting. So I'll do whatever, you know, makes it work. And I like experimenting.
And the scale of your paintings got larger and larger to really draw us in and overwhelm us.
Well, also, I got a great big space thanks to you guys and Jack Rasmussen. So how could I not make an 8-foot by 15-foot painting?
We have a question here from your daughter, Jessica.
Really?
She says, I'm wondering about the curatorial process. This is for Norma and Mary, and how you selected the works amongst the myriad of options. There are so many strong possibilities for what could have been included.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jessica. And the answer is partly just what was available to us, things that weren't in museums or weren't in collections we couldn't get to. But we had a kind of understanding from the beginning. We wanted to, and this is really all, and I say we, I mean all of us, Diane, Norma, and myself, wanted to, first of all, to represent this final 15, not final, but recent, I should say, 15, certainly not final, 15-year period when she has been involved with climate change. We wanted to represent the two major areas that she's been engaged in, that is glaciers and reefs, just to be simple about it, and COVID, of course, because that too is related so deeply to our experience of a changing world. So those were the three themes. And within that, some works, the glacial paintings were pretty much already done. As you say, that was a past period for you. Coral reefs more recent for you, but in each case, there was far more works available than we actually could include in the show. So it was just a matter of which ones look the best, which ones represent the best, that kind of thing. The COVID paintings, the most recent paintings, were still in her studio. We saw those developing. We saw the world map paintings when they were still in the studio developing. So we were privileged to have that experience of an artist not only showing recent work to us, but work that hadn't been finished yet, hadn't even gotten dried. The paint hadn't dried when we were looking at it. That was thrilling to us because we felt, you know, in some way, part of the creative process. I don't think we literally were, but we were in some way part of the whole enterprise that we were all in. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how it came together. And then the two largest paintings, Summer Heat and Unprecedented, just fit so beautifully in the space of Katzen.
Every week, Diane would be sending us more images of what was unfolding in the studio, and we would say, "Oh, we have to have that one, and we have to have that one."
Yeah.
So,
That was the fun part because I started painting COVID paintings in March of 2020, and we would meet and I would do a PowerPoint, say, okay, this is what I'm up to. And we already at that point thought it was going to be glaciers and reefs. And then Norma, you were the one who said, Diane, I like it. And I said, I don't know, I'm not really sure it's right, but you were right, Norma. I love the way it looks on that wall. But it really was so much of a collaborative process between us. And I think the reason my daughter asked that question, she's not only an artist, photographer, mixed media person, but she's also a curator. So I see where she's coming from. But this was very, very much a wonderful collaboration. Yeah.
So we have a question. People would love to hear more about your recent COVID work. what are some of the decisions you made to produce the artwork and visual elements? For example, the piece that we see here in the background, I think behind Norma.
Well, it's hard to see it all the way back there, but mapping, like as Mary Norma were in the studio in 2019, I think you guys basically saw the World Map Series almost done, right? And in that series, it was about the whole world. And I've always been interested in mapping because it's what is a map? It's about charting the land. It's about looking down on the land. Although, of course, whoever is mapping is the one who's telling the story, like all history. But we won't go there. But anyway, so when it came to that first COVID painting, what were we all looking at? We were all looking at the map of the United States. We were looking at where New York was and where Washington State was in California. And I just started by, I started with one panel and then I made a map of America. And I did the same thing, as Mary pointed out, with Summer Heat, which is another painting in the show, where I started with the map of Europe in 2019, that big heat wave. Of course, who knew there would be another one in 2020 and another one in 2021? But I started with a map, but the map looked too much this way. I turned it around. So mapping integrates some of what I, think about. And sometimes it's more present and other times not.
But Diane, in the COVID map, you were telling us that you started with the maps, but then you thought, this is too obvious. And so you added other panels. Can you talk about that?
It just kept growing. I didn't know where it was going to end, but that's the most fun about being an artist, or being a writer. You start somewhere, you have a premise, and then things evolve as new ideas come to fore. And that's it. You're right, Norma. That's what happened with that painting. Yeah.
Yeah, I was interested even in the way you decided to depict the coronavirus. It was a little bit different than I'd seen in anyone else's artwork. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I thought that was such an ugly symbol, with the things coming out. I just didn't want to use it. And I had been using circles before, so that seemed to be a better abstract metaphor for me. And there's only one painting, actually the one that's going to your museum, Alana, that does have a drawing illusion of the virus, but it's a very different kind of, a depiction of it. So I just never wanted to paint that ugly symbol, just couldn't do that. I'm not a realist,
It works very well.
Thank you.
I'm trying to get to as many of these questions as I can here. How does your commitment to a feminist perspective influence your work on climate change and on COVID, to what's happening to the world now?
Well, that's a hard one. Let the feminist art historians answer that.
Okay.
In writing my catalog essay, I felt the need to address that point because it wasn't obvious. Diane told me early on, back in the 70s, the feminist artists were doing feminist art, and she said, I never could really do that sort of thing. I felt it was too political, and she kept her politics separate from her art until this whole climate change thing brought it together. But it has struck me, and I learned in writing about her, that her feminism, I think, shows in more indirect ways. When Diane paints the mountain, for example, which she started all this painting, my essay begins with a short discussion of one of the mountain paintings. Why am I forgetting the name of that I know better than my own? Anyway, small mountain peak. I mean, the point is that she got the Matterhorn paintings. I sort of found out that she hadn't been literally from real life. She didn't travel to the Alps to see it, but she did have a book and that she used called Men and the Matterhorn or something like that. And it was about how men took on this mountain and they defeated it by climbing it and got to the top of it. Well, Diane didn't approach it in that masculinist way. She identified with the mountain. She was the mountain. She wasn't doing some harm to it or transcending it. She was the force that makes the mountain push upward from the geological earth. Now that's feminism on a much deeper level than political statements, although politics has its place too in feminist agency. So I think you have to understand that she doesn't believe that nature is female. We had that discussion. She believes that, it's kind of, yin yang or something like that. It's not so much that she presents a female identified persona. She presents herself as an explorer, as a traveler, as one going out and taking on all these things, but she does so as a female artist, not as a feminist. And in so doing, she's reappropriating the categories that men had appropriated for themselves.
But she approaches these things with a basic respect for nature, not the desire to transcend it, but to admire what it can do for us and how we are all interconnected with it.
We're all part of it. I mean, that is the key. I mean, man has been conquering nature, and look where we are now. Okay. I mean, if we only listen to the indigenous people, isn't this Indigenous Day? I mean, it's a perfect moment to say that. There's so much that the indigenous knew that all these, colonialists and imperialists came around and just destroyed and ignored, and look where we are now. So yeah, you're right, Norma. We're part of it. Alexander von Humboldt is one of my heroes, and he talks about the web of life. It's all connected. What happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic, my glaciologist friends always say. And certainly what happened in China didn't stay in China. This whole world is connected, and the more people can understand that, the more chance we have of saving what we have.
Here's a longer question. In the political world, the measure of successful activism is more than we're used to in the art world, gauged by tangible results. These may be short-term or long-term, but it comes down to legislation passed. Is there a new criticism, a new aesthetic strand for activist art, whether it can be shown to have contributed to results in the political domain that it is a part of?
Wow. Well, again, I don't take art as a journalistic narrative enterprise. My art is intimate. What I'm trying to do is really one by one, bringing people in, having an experience of walking through this AU show is a cumulative experience. I mean, I have been in the galleries a lot, and I have to say it's been very gratifying. People who don't know that much will come up and say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, we need to see this. And the more people can be moved emotionally, rather than just looking at the charts and the news in the Washington Post, the more maybe something can happen. I mean, we vote, right? We do go on climate marches, and it has to come. I mean, look at the Sunrise Movement. I think there is so much more activism and energy in the youth of today. And, I'm not youth, but I know how to identify their grandparents and talk to them too. Actually, Bill McKibben has just stopped writing for the New Yorker. He said so that he can talk more to his own generation, some of those wealthy people who are sitting around and still collecting their dividends on oil stocks. They're going to kill us. So I'm someone who does a lot of public engagement and believes this is a way in. It's my way in to talk about this issue. So of course it's political, but on a different level.
It's nice to hear a hopeful message. Diane, I've always really admired your drive and your willingness to learn and try new things. You learned how to snorkel in order to observe coral reefs firsthand for the recent body of work. And I was curious to hear what's on the horizon next for you. What are you working on now?
Well, a little bit of that is in this exhibition. Thanks to the fluidity of the curators, I think it was over the summer, we changed 4 paintings out. We have a wall of 36 20s that kind of cover 2002 to 2021. And when I started going into this new direction, I showed them to the curator and said, okay, we can put those in. My new interest, it's not new, it's all part of the same thing, is the Amazon rainforest, which is such a crucial ecological thing. I mean, again, Alexander von Humboldt, Darwin, people have gone there. Lovejoy, the man that we quoted as a conservationist who worked there for many decades. So it's being destroyed. And that concerns me. The trees are being cut down for cattle and ranching. They're also, the forests are burning, and they're doing extraction. And what is the extraction doing? I spent a month in Chile. Well, that's depleting the water. Okay, so that they're taking the water out of the ground and using it to mine copper and taking it away from the people. So it's a big issue. And I think on a visual level, what really sort of moved me in that direction was basically a shape. I was doing these 3 large paintings that I thought would be part of Unprecedented, because these 2 kept saying you have a lot of space. Well, actually we ran out of space. So I couldn't do these 2. I made these 3 5-foot square paintings that related to the big one. And one's about glaciers and one is about the fires in the West. And the third one was about the Amazon. And I just found the shape of where the Amazon is in relationship to South America. It's huge. I mean, it's so big, I couldn't believe it. It's as big as the whole area of the United States east of the Rockies. So that blew my mind, and I'm involved with that now. And hopefully, if we ever get out of this COVID morass we're in, I do hope to go there and check it out.
Wonderful. So we're nearly out of time. I wondered if we had any other remarks that Norma and Mary would like to share.
There's so much more to be said. I mean, we don't have enough time to go in all the issues that we talking about, and so I'm not going to try to jump into any one of them now. But I think the questions that came up yesterday for us, we took a group of friends, longtime friends, who came down from Princeton to see the show with us. And we had so many questions. They had so many questions and comments. We had long discussions over lunch, and it just stimulated us to realize that that this art speaks so vigorously to people today. And we do hope that those of you who are listening, if you haven't seen the show and you're in the area, will come and see this. The actual exhibition is so different from the catalog, but the catalog is wonderful in itself. It's beautiful. So please read it, buy it and read it, or read it online. And that would be my only kind of summary comment here.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm very proud and very honored to be part of that catalog. The essays by Norma and Mary are really great. I mean, they're so impressive. I'm humbled by all their words. And there's also an essay by Bill McKibben, which is another honor that I'm happy we have. It's a great catalog, and I thank the university for supporting it. So yeah, catalog, but come see the show. It's on until December 12th, which is a really long run.
Yeah, I think wonderful catalog.
Well, we should also, as curators and artists, we should thank the museum and its staff, Jack Rasmussen, Elizabeth Cowgill, Shelley, who's just come on board, and Shelley Anderson, and a lot of others, and Kevin Runyon, the installer, absolutely wonderful installer. So we worked with the team very productively and happily, and it was just great to work with the whole museum staff.
Absolutely. I have never been so well treated by the staff and by Jack Rasmussen. It's really been a joy to work with you guys and with the museum. So I thank you. It was really a wonderful opportunity.
Well, thank you all so much. So as you mentioned, the exhibition is on view through December 12th, and it's open 11 to 4 Fridays to Sundays. There will also be a hybrid symposium that Jack mentioned at the beginning, exploring climate change, and that will be November 5th through the 7th, I believe. The symposium picks up on some of the themes discussed tonight, exploring how climate change can better make, how art can help make climate change more visible and acted upon through interplay of art, science, and policy. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.